The shooting of Philando Castile by Officer Jeronimo Yanez is a terrible tragedy, and I believe he deserves some form of punishment for his mishandling and irrational approach to the situation put before him. But I don't think this was a racist killing, and the evidence fails to point to some sort of systemic racism in America's justice system. You see, this might confuse people on the left who immediately jump to the most racist conclusion, but things in crime and politics are more than black and white. In a case like this, where a black man is shot by a police officer, the left asks, is he guilty? Before immediately jumping to systemic racism. The right has a few more questions before and after asking if he's guilty, like, did the officer act appropriately in the situation? Is the crime an act of racism? And is this indicative of a greater racist trend? Well, let's run over the evidence and see if we can answer those questions. Okay, so what happened on the night of the shooting? Well, Officer Yanez had seen Castile drive by him, and Yanez believed he looked like the suspect of an armed robbery that had taken place 4 days earlier, citing his wide-set nose. So he pulls Castile over, who's with his girlfriend and her daughter, and tells him one of his brake lights is out, though he also notices the smell of pot as he approaches the vehicle. He asks for his license and registration while Castile provides his insurance info. So far, so good. But when Castile reaches into his pocket to get his license, he informs Yanez that he has a gun that he's licensed to carry. Yanez tells him not to pull it out and becomes nervous as Castile continues to reach into his pocket. Yanez shouts at Castile to not go for the gun while Castile reaches into his pocket, and him and his girlfriend keep saying he's not getting his gun. Officer Yanez sees Castile pull something dark out of his pocket, assumes it's the gun, and opens fire, firing 7 shots, hitting Castile 5 times. That all took place in less than a minute. It's all very dicey and ambiguous stuff we're looking at, but from the evidence, I think we can pretty conclusively answer the questions at hand. Did Officer Yanez act appropriately? I think he thought he had, but clearly he did not. Plain and simple. Look, I'm no cop. I don't know the direct procedure when it comes to how to handle suspects with a firearm. But Castile had every right to have his firearm. He had a conceal and carry license. Now, should Castile continue to reach down into his pocket out of sight of the nervous officer who was shouting at him not to reach for the concealed gun? No. It was not a smart move. He should have remained still, kept his hands in the air. That being said, Yanez probably asked the vaguest instructions in such a situation, telling him to not go for his gun. That leaves a lot of wiggle room for what is acceptable to do, including Castile reaching for his wallet. He and his girlfriend believed it was okay to reach into his pocket as long as he didn't grab his gun. Added to this is the fact that they were both high, which, let's face it, is going to inhibit their judgment of the situation, to believe it would be okay for him to keep going for his wallet. Yanez needed to give clear instructions to ensure there wasn't the confusion that occurred, and also should not have immediately escalated the situation upon knowledge of a gun. He believed he was confronting a robber and was afraid as Castile appeared to disobey orders, so he believed his life was in danger. But he was the one who increased the tension, not Castile. Finally, I believe he acted outside the acceptable use of force, unloading 7 shots on a moment's notice. Yanez clearly mishandled the situation from start to finish. So is he guilty of any crime? Officer Yanez would be charged with second-degree manslaughter and 2 counts of reckless use of a firearm. Now, second-degree or involuntary manslaughter in the state of Minnesota reads as, by the person's culpable negligence, whereby the person creates an unreasonable risk and consciously takes chances of causing death or great bodily harm to another. Now, much like the jury stated, the wording of culpable negligence is indeed confusing. But based on the evidence, he clearly made an unreasonable risk by so suddenly pulling and firing his gun. While I believe based on his testimony, Yanez truly believed his life could be at risk, there isn't enough evidence to support that notion. I think that this unjustified reaction to a potential threat is indeed involuntary manslaughter, and he should have been found guilty. And he should clearly have been found guilty of reckless use of a firearm. No one needs 7 rounds to be incapacitated. And maybe if Yanez had used better self-control, Castile could have survived. Alright, now the big one. Does this make it a case of racism? Short answer, no. Long answer, there's just no evidence to prove that he shot Castile for being black. I mean, first off, Jeronimo Yanez is Mexican-American. I've yet to hear the left worry about Hispanic racism towards blacks, though you hear the right worry about it. So unless they want to start that conversation, I'm going to assume that they don't actually care about the facts. They just want to shout racism on a black-white basis. Secondly, he didn't profile Castile based on race. He already knew the suspect was black, but he believed through facial features that Castile was a match. Third, based on his testimony, it wasn't Castile being black that unnerved him. It appeared to be his high state, the fact that he was carrying, mixed with Yanez's belief that Castile was an armed robber. Finally, testimony reveals that Yanez was visibly and audibly horrified by what he had done, shouting that he had told him not to go for his gun, while also crying. This is not the reaction of someone who was trying to kill a man for being black. It sounds like a man who hadn't been in this kind of situation, acted on adrenaline and nervousness, and made a terrible decision. So last question. Is this indicative of a systemic problem? Well, obviously no. If there's little to indicate racism in the case, it kind of ruins the narrative that cops are out to get black men. I mean, not only is this case not indicative of racism, but the police station in which Yanez worked hadn't had a cop shooting case in 30 years. Not quite the killers they're painted to be. Again, Philando Castile's death shouldn't have happened, and I believe a good man was killed, and Yanez should be charged for his misconduct. But there's no proof that racism had one iota to do with this senseless death. But little of this changed the minds and hearts of Black Lives Matter and the protesting cohorts, who immediately took to the streets to expose the inherent racism of the courts. They blocked traffic, attacked police officers, and caused the usual brand of senseless mayhem. I'm going to say this, and I don't care what you think. Black Lives Matter is a useless, destructive group that has done more to hurt race relations than improve them. And because of the continued issue of black and law enforcement tensions created by them, I'm going to use this video to explain why Black Lives Matter is terrible for black Americans. First off, they're fighting for the wrong cause. No, unarmed black men are not being disproportionately targeted and murdered by slave catcher police. Data of those killed by police reveals that white men make up double the fatalities that black men do. Black victims do make up 24% of those killed, despite being 13% of the population. Sounds like racism, right? Well, until you realize that black men commit nearly 50% of violent crimes, meaning they're being immensely underrepresented in shootings. This can be affirmed by a Harvard professor, who's a black leftist, who in 2014 concluded that cops were less likely to shoot blacks than whites in comparable situations. Plus, a vast majority of cop shootings involved armed assailants, which is probably why the DOJ concluded that a cop was 19 times more likely to be killed by an armed black man than a cop was to kill an unarmed black man. That's not to say that individual cops can't be racist. They absolutely can. But as a whole, police aren't out to get black men. Most of the time, it's police misconduct. And these cases of misconduct are generally conflated into cases of racism. I think there's a great video by Steven Crowder that explains this on a case-by-case level. Those cops should be punished, but cops as a whole should not be vilified. Which brings me to tactics. BLM has some of the worst protest strategies of any American group, and that includes Antifa and BAM. At best, they will push aside whoever is trying to spread a message to shoehorn themselves in like an insatiable narcissist. Whether it's the gay pride parades or a Bernie Sanders rally, God forbid we forget their mere existence. At worst, well, they're burning their own communities, calling for the burning of suburban communities.
Take that shit to the suburbs! Burn that shit down!
Chanting for dead cops.
Dead cops!
And chanting for more dead cops.
Pigs in the blanket! Fry like bacon! Pigs in the blanket! Fry like bacon!
And they're calling for racist attack on whites that border on lynchings.
Is they white? They white, get their ass! And they beating up every white person!
Again, like critical race theorists, they seek to swing the pendulum as far in the opposite direction, as they frequently target, beat up, kidnap, or shoot white people. But even worse, so much worse, is their lasting effect. As right-wingers warned for years, dehumanizing police officers would inevitably lead to a blowback in the police community. And 2016, unfortunately, proved them all right. 2016 was the largest year increase in gun-related deaths of police in American history, recording 25 more police homicides, or 62% more than last year. 21 officers in 2016 were killed in ambushes, while 2017 has already resulted in 13 more cop deaths than last year. But saving the worst for last, the worst effect of BLM is on the black inner-city communities. It's not only that Black Lives Matter unleashes its anger on the communities it wants to help, burning local businesses while driving away allies by attacking people based on their skin color. No, it's that BLM leads to more black lives lost than by police shootings by exponential numbers. You see, when police officers are attacked and demonized by a mob, as well as by their own mayors and the former president, for a few individuals making a mistake while doing their jobs in a dangerous inner city, other cops no longer want to take the risk to actively police the dangerous inner cities. Dubbed the Ferguson effect by Heather McDonald, many of these inner cities have been forced to fend for themselves, and results are devastating. Analysis, my own I might add, of the 20 largest cities reveals that 17 had double-digit increases in murders since 2014, with an average of 33% increases. Nearly 1,300 people were unnecessarily killed. Even liberal safe haven San Francisco is witnessing an extensive increase. And besides Chicago, which is a war zone in America, these aren't even the worst incidents. Memphis more than doubled in homicides. Baltimore is begging the FBI to come police their streets. Many of these cities are seeing the worst homicide rates in 20 to 25 years. Now, some have theorized over different explanations of this disaster, like downsized police forces and increases in heroin. It might be a terrible cocktail of many factors, but like it or not, the police are the best defense in these communities against violent crime. And before you accuse me of racism for not supporting Black Lives Matter, take some time to look at the individuals, the young men and children who were unnecessarily killed for a faulty narrative, and then decide if I don't care. And I think this really shows if we all just took some time to see if our anger is justified or aimed at the right cause, if the issue at hand is actually as black and white as we want it to be, we could actually save lives. I'm Ben Sano, the elephant in the room. I hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe.